Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 343, Go Go Ludicolo. The episode begins with Ash and gang still making their way to Petalburg City, as Max checks the Pokénav to find out that they were very close to Petalburg City, since they would be there after they crossed over a mountain. Ash was very excited for his upcoming gym battle, so he began to rush towards Petalburg, although May, even though she and Max were both excited to see their mom and dad again, told Ash to slow down and take a break, since she was tired. So Ash was forced to oblige, as Ash and the gang took a break. Making a little picnic, as Brock somehow prepared some tea, which May, Max, Ash, and Brock all happily liked. During the break, everyone discussed what they were most excited to do upon returning to Petalburg City. May revealed her plans by pulling out her pink and orange contest ribbons, as Max stared at them, knowing what May was talking about. As May declared that she was most excited to show her parents her two contest ribbons, along with her two new Pokemon, Beautyfly and Skitty, and Max stated he was excited to see his parents' reactions to this. Ash, of course, revealed that his plans were to challenge Norman and win his 5th Hoenn Gym badge, with Ash and Pikachu both confident that they could win the badge. Although May and Max get a little upset at Ash for underestimating their father, reassuring Ash that he was very strong, although Ash rebuttals that he was strong as well, and he was in fact stronger than Norman, especially now that he had more Pokemon. Though Brock then butts in as he was drinking water from his canteen, and reminds Ash not to be overconfident, and also reminds him that he hasn't chosen the 3 Pokemon that he was going to battle Norman with, and asked if he had any idea who he planned to use, with Ash denying this. So he calls out all his Pokemon for 2 reasons. 1, to prove to May, Max, and Brock that his Pokemon were strong, and 2, to help him pick what 3 Pokemon he should use out of the 5 that he had: Pikachu, Torkoal, Grovyle, Corphish, and Taillow. May was glad that if she ever chose to battle her dad, she wouldn't have to choose which Pokemon to use, as she only had 3, although Max simply stated that all he wanted was 1 Pokemon. Yeah, well, sucks to be you, Max. Anyways, upon seeing all his Pokemon together, Ash soon realized that none of his team members, aside from Pikachu, had actually met his newly evolved Grovyle yet, because, they'd only be used to seeing him as a Trico. Ash then saw that Corphish, who used to be Trico's best friend, was now feeling kind of scared around it, going a bit apeshit to the point where Pikachu had to calm him down. So he knew that introductions were definitely in order. So he introduced Grovyle to Corphish first, and explained what had happened, stating that Trico had already evolved into Grovyle. Though, even after having the situation explained, Corphish still seemed kinda on edge around Grovyle. But as for Torkoal and Taillow flew onto Torkoal's back, and the two of them happily greeted Grovyle, and congratulated it on the evolution. Now that introductions were out of the way, it was time for Ash to plan a strategy to beat Norman, and pick 3 Pokemon to use, deciding to pick his choices based on the Pokemon that Norman used. So he tried to remember which Pokemon Norman would use, but realized that he only knew that Norman had a Vigoroth, and would likely use it, but he didn't know anything else, aside from the fact that Norman's Vigoroth was hyper as fuck. Ash, not being able to remember any of Norman's other Pokemon, therefore couldn't come up with an effective strategy, so he asked May and Max if they could recall any Pokemon that Norman had that he didn't know about. May admitted that she didn't know, because Norman didn't usually let them watch a whole bunch of his gym battles, so she couldn't really remember anything. But when Max initially said the same thing, he soon changed his tune, and stated that he did actually remember some other Pokemon that his father used, but he wouldn't give Ash any of the details, since he would feel guilty giving Ash advice to beat his own father, and he would feel guilty potentially turning the match in someone else's favor, when Ash should only win if he could know Norman's Pokemon. He essentially thought that him telling Ash any secrets of Norman's was cheating. Ash gets annoyed at this, as Max then tells May to not tell Ash anything either, but May stands by the fact that she truly didn't know any of the other Pokemon that their father had. Max then asks May a different question, asking her if she was going to cheer for their father or Ash. May promised that she would cheer for her father, since she didn't want her father to win. She also didn't want Ash to lose either. And Max got angry at this, thinking that May should just cheer for their father, period, because it didn't matter how good of friends they were with Ash. Norman was their goddamn father. Just then, the conversation was interrupted, as Taillow had flown up and apparently went to an orange tree, as it dropped an orange directly into Ash's hands, leading Ash to thank it, as he was hungry as fuck. Although, he then saw that Taillow was looking to lead Ash and the gang somewhere, and they came to the conclusion that this must have been to the orange tree, so he realized that they could get more oranges for everybody, not just himself. So they all gave chase to Taillow, and they were eventually led to a tree full of more oranges, as they ran extremely fast. Corphish saw that Taillow had led Ash and the gang to this fruit tree, and it wanted to help, just like Taillow had, by actually getting some fruit from the tree, as well as getting some fruit for itself, because it was hungry as fuck. So it ran over to the tree and used the momentum it had kicked up to climb up the tree. But when it grabbed 2 oranges with its pincers, it accidentally smashed them to nothing but pulps, leading Ash to inform Corphish that its pincers were too strong to grip such fragile fruit like oranges. Seeing how Corphish had failed, Pikachu tried to get the oranges, but it had trouble climbing up the tree and just slid down, failing as well. As for Corphish, it hadn't given up yet, despite its first fail, so it tried knocking the oranges down from at the bottom of the tree using a bubble beam, although this backfires, utterly destroying the fruit. Max pleads Corphish to stop what he was doing, explaining that it was fucking ruining all the fruit, but Corphish doesn't stop, as it desperately resorts to ramming the tree, trying to knock the fruit down. The fruit that was left, anyway. But Corfish still failed, so suddenly Grovyle took action, making use of its new Leaf Blade attack as it rushed up to the tree and used Leaf Blade on the tree to cut a lot of the oranges from the tree. Max and May especially were very glad to have the fruit, as they all began chowing down, along with Pikachu, Torkoal, and Tailo, as Ash and the gang, Pikachu, Torkoal, and Tailo all congratulated Grovyle on its awesome Leaf Blade, with Ash remarking how everyone loves Grovyle. Well, aside from Corfish, though, as Corfish hadn't congratulated Grovyle at all, it was jealous of the attention that it was receiving. Just then, a huge net comes down out of nowhere and captures all of Ash's Pokemon. At first, Ash and the gang didn't know where the net came from, but then they looked up into the sky and saw that Team Rocket had arrived in their Meowth balloon and lifted the net up, bragging about how they just captured all of Ash's Pokemon. However, Ash has Pikachu use Thunderbolt to break itself out of the net, but it actually didn't, because Team Rocket just laughed, stating that Ash and the gang should have expected by now that all of the nets would be electric-proof, just as this one was, so Pikachu's Thunderbolt did absolutely jack shit. Corfish, trying to impress everyone, tries to break it and the rest of the Pokemon out by cutting the net with its claws, but the net was too strong, leading Team Rocket to laugh once again, stating that it was truly hopeless for Ash and the gang. The Pokemon would never be free, but much to Team Rocket and Corfish's dismay, because it had just been shown up, Ash had Grovyle use a Leaf Blade, which was powerful enough to break the net and set all the Pokemon free. Even though Team Rocket was frustrated, though, they couldn't help but be impressed by Grovyle's strength, but before they could even think about recapturing Grovyle, Grovyle sent Team Rocket blasting off by giving them a bullet seed to the face and cutting a huge hole in their Meowth balloon with another Leaf Blade. Ash and the gang, Torkoal, Tailo, and Pikachu were very, very pleased with Grovyle and praised it for its strength, although Corfish did not praise Grovyle once again, still jealous of the praise that Grovyle was receiving. Which leads Corfish to go up to Grovyle and tell it and the other Pokemon that what Grovyle did wasn't that big of a fucking deal, and stated that everyone should just calm down and not congratulate Grovyle. Ash and the gang noticed this, so Ash told Corfish to stop being rude to Grovyle, as May suggested that Corfish could be jealous. Although Brock thought that instead of Corfish being jealous, it was instead more so mad at Ash than actually Grovyle, thinking that maybe Ash favored Grovyle over it since Grovyle was at a higher evolutionary stage, so it was taking out its anger on Grovyle instead of Ash, as to not upset its trainer. May suggested that Corfish may be able to be cheered up if it just had something to eat, and Brock thought this was a good idea, so he whipped up a good lunch for both Ash and the gang and all the Pokemon, hoping that Corfish would feel better once it ate, and the eating would provide a good bonding experience. So he made some special Pokemon food for the Pokemon, as Tailo and Pikachu even shared out of one individual bowl, and Grovyle chose to eat nothing, and he made some sandwiches for Ash and the gang. Just as Ash and the gang were about to dig into their sandwiches, though, they heard some bongo drums in the distance, and the sound got louder as the source of the bongo drums got closer. However, the next thing Ash and the gang see isn't drums, but instead a Ludicolo, and it moves towards them while doing a dance. Ash takes out his Pokedex and learns about Ludicolo, especially learning that it was the evolved form of Lombre and was apparently a carefree Pokemon with a habit of flailing and dancing about. Ash and the gang were still wondering where the fuck the sound of the bongo drums were coming from if it wasn't Ludicolo, when just then a man comes out of the same bushes that Ludicolo had come out of, apparently being this Ludicolo's trainer. And he, of course, was the one playing the bongo drums, and he still played them as he introduced himself as Poncho and confirmed that the Ludicolo was his. Poncho then adds that he had a special talent of Pokemon dance collaboration, being able to use his bongo drums to control his Ludicolo's motions, and because of this, he used his Ludicolo to help him entertain people. Brock then asked Poncho if he originally had Ludicolo as a Lombre, and Poncho confirms this. So Brock asks what he really wanted to ask, being how Ludicolo evolved, since Brock had heard that Ludicolo didn't evolve by level up, but he wanted to know how he could make Ludicolo evolve, knowing that Lombre was the pre-evolution of it. And Poncho explained that a water stone was needed. Brock then revealed to Poncho the fact that he had a Lombre, and stated that because it was the pre-evolution of Ludicolo, the two of them would probably get along, so he sent out his Lombre so that it could introduce itself to Ludicolo. Lombre and Ludicolo seem to get along fine, while Poncho notices that Lombre seems to have been trained pretty well, stating that it reminded him of back when his Ludicolo was a Lombre, and commends Brock on the good training. Poncho then notices the sandwiches that still hadn't been eaten, and he immediately wanted them because he was hungry as fuck, so he challenged any one of Ash and the gang to the battle, asking if any of them would like to battle him for the sandwiches, stating that if he wins, he gets the sandwiches, but if he lost, he would buy Ash and the gang some cheeseburgers at the next town. Ash immediately accepted Poncho's challenge, wanting a warm-up battle for the Petalburg gym, but also he wanted some cheeseburgers as well. So the battle then begins, as Poncho chooses his trusty Ludicolo, though Ash debated who to choose, when it seemed like the decision was made for him, as Grovyle stepped in front of him, wanting to battle, since it, much like Ash, would jump at any chance possible to battle. So Ash officially chose Grovyle, but Corfish, seeing this, was annoyed that Grovyle would be getting more attention in the battle, so it went up to Ash and acted like it wanted to battle as well, wanting to try and upstage Grovyle. Since Corfish was really, really eager to battle, and Grovyle was pretty much equally as eager, but he was more nonchalant about it, this led Ash to officially pick Corfish to battle against Ludicolo. Poncho was more than happy to battle against Corfish, seeing how determined it looked, and danced with Ludicolo to warm himself up for battle, and to warm Ludicolo up as well, and doing a massive bongo beat to dance to, although Ash was kind of annoyed by this, suggesting that Ludicolo and Poncho do this dance in private. Brock accused Ash of being rude, saying that if Poncho and Ludicolo wanted to do some dancing, they should be able to. Ash just ignored Brock's comment and stated that he was going to win no matter what, and the battle then began as Corfish and Ash stood on one end of the makeshift forest battlefield, while Poncho and Ludicolo stood on the other. So when Brock officially declared it was time to start, and Corfish went in for a vice grip, but Ludicolo easily dodged. thanks to Poncho playing a certain rhythm with his bongos, which acted as a way to tell Ludicolo how to dodge. So Corphish then tried a Bubble Beam, but Ludicolo blocked this by using its fists to create a Protect, which absorbed all the bubbles. Ash was getting frustrated, leading Brock and Max to point out that the reason why Ash was so frustrated was because he had underestimated Ludicolo, not thinking it was that powerful. While May simply commented that she was going to miss her sandwich, knowing that Poncho would likely win and take it. However, Corphish then goes into a Crab Hammer, but this attack didn't do anything to Ludicolo either, as Ludicolo used Double Team. With the double teams being so fast that Corphish couldn't even hit any of the double team copies. So Corphish went back to Ash and waited with its Crab Hammer still active. So Ash tries to think of another way for Corphish to attack Ludicolo and its duplicates, but all Ash could think of was to just try Crab Hammer again. So Corphish does so, and only ends up hitting the fake Ludicolos. But this gave Ash the idea to just have Corphish destroy every single one of the duplicates, and then make its way to the main one, not having any other better idea. So Corphish begins to do this, but Ludicolo interrupts Corphish by sneaking up on it and using Focus Punch, hitting Corphish hard, to the point where it just barely managed to get up. And then Corphish goes in for another Vice Grip, but just like before, Ludicolo dodged thanks to more dancing instructions and bongo playing by Poncho. Corphish then tried a Bubble Beam, but Ludicolo just used Protect again, like it did before. Corphish then tried a Crab Hammer again, but Ludicolo intercepted by using a Focus Punch, even though its double team copies were gone by this point. And this knocked Corphish to the ground, tiring it out, and stopped Corphish's Crab Hammer. But this didn't stop Corphish from using one last Crab Hammer, but then Ludicolo uses a different attack this time, knocking Corphish out with a Hyper Beam, ending the battle as Brock officially declared that Poncho was the winner. Poncho laughed as he congratulated his Ludicolo and thanked Ash and the gang for the sandwiches as he put them in a bag and ran off with his Ludicolo, taking the sandwiches with him to parts unknown, but somewhere deep in the forest. Ash tried to call for Poncho to come back, but Poncho didn't hear him, and Brock suggested that Ash just let Poncho go, since they made a deal and should respect it, even if that meant they lost their sandwiches. Ash then apologized for losing, stating that he felt really down about losing the battle, but Brock told Ash it was fine, stating that it was probably best that Corphish got some battling out of its system, even if it lost anyways, since it seemed really desperate to battle. Although Ash doubted that Corphish battling really was for the best, as he noticed that Corphish had regained consciousness, looked angrier than ever now. To make matters worse, May and Max didn't even accept Ash's apology for losing, stating that he lost because him and his Corphish were not in sync, and in the end, Ludicolo had won because they had underestimated it. Brock didn't want the gang to start fighting, so he decided to end the tensions by declaring that he would simply make more sandwiches to avoid anyone going hungry. So, May and Max, happy to have sandwiches, decided to drop the argument, because that's really the only reason why they were bitchy about Ash losing anyways. Happy that their starving would come to an end. As Brock began work on the sandwiches, Ash began to wonder why him and Corphish didn't battle in sync, as they usually did. But as Ash went to question Corphish on why they weren't battling in sync, he noticed that Corphish seemed pretty distracted, and soon enough, Ash saw that it was still angry about its loss, and that's what it was distracted about. Pikachu tried to comfort Corphish, but Corphish just wandered off into the bushes, disappearing from Ash and the gang's view, though Ash wanted to find Corphish as quick as possible to find out why it was taking its loss so hard this time, so he sent Tailo to go find Corphish, but Tailo couldn't find it after searching. Ash and the gang continued to debate on why Corphish was taking this loss so seriously, leading May to point out that the gang had been praising Grovyle a lot lately, so Corphish likely seemed jealous of Grovyle, and especially since it was ignored in favor of Grovyle. Corphish probably wanted to prove itself and prove that it could be strong in battle as well, and it saw the perfect chance when Ash chose Grovyle to battle, so it was like, no, what are you doing? I want to battle, dude. And then when it lost, it obviously got pissed off at this, so it was angry. So it was angry at both losing the battle and Ash and the gang's favoritism towards Grovyle. Meanwhile, Corphish was now all alone, walking through the bushes into the forest, when it heard a bongo beating, and went towards it. This bongo was, of course, Poncho playing his bongo while eating the sandwiches with Ludicolo, happily enjoying them, although Poncho did feel a little bad for taking Ash and the gang sandwiches, so he promised himself that the next time he saw Ash and the gang, he would give them cheeseburgers. While Poncho said this, he and Ludicolo were doing their bongo dancing, and this was, of course, the sound that caused Corphish to show up in front of them. Poncho was able to recognize it as the same Corphish that Ludicolo just beat, being Ash's Corphish, and wondered what it was doing. And Corphish proceeded to shake its claws, motioning that it wanted to battle, although Poncho misunderstood Corphish, thinking that it wanted one of the sandwiches, so he tries to give it one, and even a few extra ones as well to be extra nice, but was surprised when Corphish refused, and then waved its claws again, and Poncho finally got the message that Corphish wanted to battle, wanting a rematch for what had happened earlier. Though since Poncho and his Ludicolo were too busy practicing their dancing, Poncho tried to refuse, telling Corphish to calm down. Meanwhile, Team Rocket was spying on not Ash and the gang, but Poncho, Ludicolo, and Corphish from some bushes, using binoculars. They had seen Ludicolo's dancing just now, and were impressed by it, and were also impressed as they heard Poncho mention how Ludicolo had defeated Ash's Corphish. As usual, Team Rocket was so impressed that they declared they wanted to capture Ludicolo, and Meowth only intensified Team Rocket's want to capture Ludicolo when he had a boss fantasy, mentioning how they could capture Ludicolo for Giovanni, since Ludicolo's dancing would entertain Giovanni and lift his spirits. Team Rocket all cheered at first, although James soon realized that Giovanni may find Ludicolo's dancing annoying, and questioned what Team Rocket would do then, but Meowth angrily rebutted that dancing would fill anyone with joy. Meowth was intimidating James, although James was still skeptical about stealing Ludicolo now, but Jesse simply shut James up, making the final decision that they would steal Ludicolo. So, as Poncho was still trying to convince Corfish to back off, Team Rocket initiated their plan by throwing a smoke bomb to envelop Ludicolo, Corfish, and Poncho in smoke and scare them, causing them to run away in fear. And they end up running to the edge of a cliff, where a hole, dug by Team Rocket, as you would expect, was waiting for them, meaning that Ludicolo and Poncho fell into the hole. Though Corfish was slow, so by the time it caught up to Ludicolo and Poncho, they had already fallen into the hole, and Team Rocket had floated over it in their Meowth balloon, and proceeded to deploy a net and capture Ludicolo and Poncho inside, and then lift up the net, which was attached to the bottom of their Meowth balloon, in a matter of seconds. Although, since Corfish was free, it was able to try and save Ludicolo and Poncho, wanting to prove itself. So, it used a bubble beam, but this only hit Team Rocket, which they quickly recovered from, and the net was still undamaged. So, Corfish tried something else, which was jumping on a tree branch, and then going from this tree branch straight to the net, which it desperately grabs onto, and then tries to pry open with its claws. Team Rocket just laughs, seeing Corfish not even making a dent on the net, taunting that they would never be able to save Poncho and Ludicolo, as Wobbuffet forcibly pops out of his Pokeball, and agrees. However, Corfish thinks fast and tries one last idea, which was to drop down from the net, and instead hit the Meowth balloon with its claw, causing the Meowth balloon to pop, and sending Team Rocket blasting off, as the Meowth balloon deflates and crashes into the forest. Extremely fast. Corfish had hung on to the deflated Meowth balloon as it crashed, since, obviously, Ludicolo and Poncho were crashing with the Meowth balloon, and wanted to save them as soon as the balloon crashed. When the balloon did crash, it landed right next to Ash and the gang, with Ash and the gang actually having had to run a few feet to avoid getting hit by the Meowth balloon. But anyways, when Ash and the gang inspected the crashed Meowth balloon, they were surprised to see that Poncho, Corfish, and Ludicolo emerged from it, since the crash had destroyed the net that held Ludicolo and Poncho, setting them free. Ash and the gang happily greeted them, especially Corfish, as Poncho explained what had happened, when suddenly Team Rocket emerged from the remains of their Meowth balloon and declared that they wouldn't give up and were going to steal Ludicolo still. While Team Rocket did their motto, Brock suggested to Ash that he should give Corfish a chance to prove itself again, this time by defeating Team Rocket, and Ash agreed this was a good idea, as he sent Corfish into battle, as James sent out his Cacnea, and Jessie sent in his Viper, with Cacnea, of course, hugging James, prickling him. Corfish was very happy to have the opportunity to prove itself, as it used a Bubble Beam on both Cacnea and Viper, although this didn't stop Viper from going to use Bite, and Cacnea from going to use Needle Arm, but Corfish simply dodges and uses Vice Grip on both Cacnea and Viper. Cacnea then uses a Pin Missile, but Corfish uses Harden to protect itself from the Pin Missile, deflecting it, and then it uses a Crab Hammer to knock both Viper and Cacnea out, and then it sends Team Rocket off, blasting off with a Bubble Beam, also knocking Viper and Cacnea's knocked out bodies into the remains of the Meowth balloon, and causing a whole bunch of dirt to be kicked up, and covering Team Rocket with rock and dirt as they got blasted off, much to their dismay. With Team Rocket gone, May asks if Corfish had went to Poncho because it wanted Poncho to be its new trainer or something, but Poncho informs May that Corfish wanted a rematch with him. Then, Ash and the gang invite Poncho and his Ludicolo for some dinner, as Brock cooks some stew, and everyone sits down to eat, with Poncho complimenting Brock's stew, and Ash compliments it as well. While everyone was eating, May pointed out how Corfish did way better against Team Rocket than it did against Poncho and his Ludicolo, with Poncho agreeing, stating that Corfish had really proved itself, as opposed to when it battled with Ludicolo, where Ludicolo made it look like a little shrimp. Poncho then states that because of Corfish's strength that he had saw against Team Rocket, he and his Ludicolo must have just been lucky when they battled to have actually been able to pull off the win, and states that sometimes Pokemon could just have an off day, and earlier in the day must have been Corfish's off day. Basically, he just thought that Corfish had bad luck during their battle, and comments on how both humans and Pokemon could have a bad day. Poncho then admits that he still felt bad about taking Ash and the gang's sandwiches, and stated that because of Corfish proving itself and showing its strength, Corfish teaching him that both humans and Pokemon could have bad days, and as thanks for Corfish saving him and Ludicolo, Poncho was going to share all the sandwiches with Ash and the gang, much to their delight, as they enjoyed the sandwiches with the stew. Poncho then thanks Corfish formally for saving it and Ludicolo, and upon hearing Poncho thank Corfish, this leads everyone else to glaze up Corfish as well, with Torkoal crying out in happiness seeing Corfish has returned, spraying a little bit of smoke on Corfish by accident. And May, Max, Ash, Brock, Tailo, and Pikachu then thank Corfish as well, and compliment it. As for Grovyle, it didn't compliment Corfish, just because it was nervous to even talk to Corfish, because it knew that Corfish's bad mood earlier was partially its fault, and it felt guilty because of this. But Corfish then approached Grovyle, and made up with it by shaking its hand with its claw, and calling a truce, stating that Corfish would be more than happy to support Grovyle, and see Grovyle get love and support from everyone else, so long as Corfish would get support from Grovyle, and get as much support from everyone else, and Grovyle of course agreed to this, and the two Pokemon smiled at each other, friends again. Yay! After everyone was done eating, Ash declared that he wanted to have a rematch with Poncho and prove himself, and was initially going to use Corfish again, but then he saw that Corfish was all happy now, so he figured that he should take the opportunity to use a different Pokemon to see if he could come up with a different strategy. And he chose Torkoal, seeing that it hadn't battled in quite a while, so it should get a chance. Poncho agrees to this, so he and Ludicolo go to one side of the makeshift forest battlefield, while Ash and Torkoal go to the other side, and Brock takes the ref position, officially declaring it was time for the battle to begin, as Torkoal pumps itself up by snorting out smoke, and then starts things off with a flamethrower, although Ludicolo dodges, using Poncho's dancing techniques and bongo techniques. Ash knew that he couldn't just let Ludicolo keep blocking all of his attacks, and he had to come up with a new strategy. As Ludicolo then went with a Focus Punch, as Ash remained concentrated and was able to come up with an idea to block the Focus Punch himself by having Torkoal use Iron Defense to withdraw into its shell to negate most of the damage from the Focus Punch. Ludicolo then follows up with a double team to create multiple copies of itself, but Ash didn't freak out, as he had Torkoal pop out of its shell, and he focused immensely, having Torkoal destroy all the duplicates with a single flamethrower, spreading it all over. And since Ash was more focused, he was able to direct Torkoal properly to hit certain Ludicolos, and eventually he was able to knock out all the fake ones and hit the real Ludicolo. Torkoal then goes in for another attack, charging up to Ludicolo, as Brock, May, and Max comment that Ash had learned to handle his Pokemon a lot better in battle, since he had learned to not get so overconfident and underestimate opponents, and battle with control, as opposed to more impulsiveness. Hopefully this growth actually stayed for a while, because I feel like Ho and Ash has been kind of stagnant for a while. But yeah, hopefully this growth stays. Anyways, the battle soon ends, though we don't get to see who ended up winning, though I think it's safe to assume that Ash and Torkoal probably ended up winning. So, Ash and the gang then say goodbye to Poncho and Ludicolo, and they continue on to Petalburg City, with Ash having high hopes now about winning the Petalburg badge against Norman, but he knew to try not to get overconfident now. I feel like he's learned that like 10,000 times, but maybe this time he's just learned to battle less impulsively as well.